in this video, we're going to learn how to do a buttonhole. And so one of the things we're going to have to do to start off is switch out our presser foot. So this is our standard presser foot, and I'm going to remove it by taking this little metal lever, pushing that back, and then this whole thing will just kind of fall out. And that's what we want. We want to take that whole guy out. Then I'm going to take a buttonhole presser foot, which looks similar to this is what it looks like. And we are going to put this in. So you'll see that there's a little hole right here, and there's actually a little cone back behind the needle. So you'll see that on your machine. And I'm just going to put that hole up on that cone, and I'll take that same lever that I used earlier and I'll just swing it back down. And that's how we put in our buttonhole foot. So that's the first step of this. Next, I'm going to take my sample, and let me just zoom out a little. I'll take my sample and I'm going to fold it in half because buttonholes, they use a lot of really close together stitches. You can kind of see here. And they have a tendency to make knots and things if you don't have thick enough fabric. So we're going to do 2 layers of fabric for this. So make sure, absolutely do not do this just 1 layer of fabric. You'll probably end up with a big knot. So we're going to fold it in half. And I'm going to make a couple markings so that I know how long I want my buttonhole to be. So let's say that I'm going to do a 3/4 of an inch buttonhole. So I'll mark first just at the top, and then I'll go down 3/4 of an inch, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and I'll mark there. So this is where I'm going to start, and this is where I'm going to stop. So I've switched out my presser foot, and now I need to switch out my stitch. So I'm going to look over here at my stitch selection buttons and find my buttonhole stitch, which is 0. And you can see that changes my LED screen. It also says number 3 right there next to the presser foot, saying that I need to change my presser foot, which I already did, right? This one says 3A on it. I've also marked the 3/4 of an inch buttonhole that I'm going to be doing. Obviously, if you were doing this and your fabric was going to be showing for a buttonhole, you wouldn't just make huge marks, but you could just use pins, or you could do masking tape to make a more temporary marking. But since this is a sample, we don't need to be super fancy. So I'm going to go ahead and slide in my fabric, and I'll try and show you in just a second what that looks like for me. So you can see that blue marking, and I'm just going to try and line that up with my needle, so I can kind of lower my needle to make sure that's right where I want it. And then I'm going to line this edge up just so I can see that it's parallel. It doesn't matter how close or far I am for this sample. But once I get it so that I'm lined up with this first line, I'm ready to go, and I can go ahead and actually just start sewing. And I'm going to sew down to this blue line. So I'll just sew straight down. And so it's going to make the first left side of my buttonhole, and it's going to do some really close zigzags. See, this thread's kind of getting in the way. I can go ahead and just trim that out of my way. Oh. We'll keep sewing. And I'm just going to keep going all the way down to that blue line. And once I get to the blue line, I'm going to stop. So I got to my line and I'm going to stop. Okay, so I just sewed to the edge of this blue line, and then I put my reverse button 1 time. And that's telling my machine, okay, that's as long as I want my buttonhole to be, and it's going to do the rest for me. So you can see now as I press my presser foot, or my foot pedal, it changes where it's at on this little thing. So it says auto in the middle, and that's just automatically going to change me to sewing the next part. So it's going to sew backwards along parallel to the line that I already sewed, and then it's going to sew the top now. And I'm not even doing anything, hands-free. It's just doing it for me. And then it's going to go back down the right side. You can see it sewing. It's going all the way down. And now it's going to finish off the bottom for me. At the end, it'll do some slow stitches and then stop, and that's how I know my buttonhole's done. So I can just go ahead and lift up my presser foot. This guy will slide forward. This guy, by the way, he moves the whole fabric for you, so you don't have to, which is really great. You can pull this guy out, little pattern, or my little fabric sample, and I'm going to cut it. So I've created a buttonhole, but I can't really put a button through it yet because there is no hole yet. So in order to do my hole, I'm going to take a pin, and I'm going to pin it through my fabric so it comes up, and this metal goes across just below the top of my buttonhole. And that's just kind of for security, because I'm going to try and cut up through using my seam ripper, and I don't want to accidentally cut all the way through my buttonhole because that would kind of ruin it. So this pin is going to keep it safe on top. Then I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm just going to poke my seam ripper through, and then I will find where my pin is and poke my seam ripper through up there as well. So you can see it coming out through the top. And then I'm just going to push or pull my fabric through, and my seam ripper should just cut that straight line so that I have a little buttonhole. So now we have a buttonhole all finished. Just a reminder, once you have finished your buttonhole, go ahead and return your buttonhole foot to Mrs. Taylor so they don't get lost. And then replace your original presser foot right back onto your machine just like it was before.